The healer is an archetype that's been prevalent throughout most of video game history, and you can go from Mercy in Overwatch to the Medic in Team Fortress 2, all the way back to the healer classes of World of Warcraft when it was first released. And they all take inspiration from the Cleric. Starting out, Dungeons & Dragons didn't really have a healer class. They had fighters, they had wizards, but it was only the introduction of a healer because of the necessity of going through these long dungeons and having to heal up was needed. In most video games, there is the archetype of the DPS, which is damage per second, the tank, which is the role of taking as much damage and aggro from the enemies, and the healer, dishing out healing and keeping everybody alive and topped up. And I think the thing that personifies this the most is the Life Domain Cleric. I can't think of any situation that a party wouldn't have a Life Domain Cleric with them. They can literally turn the tide of battle and get everybody back into the fight in no time. So, in today's video, we're going to go over what race you should pick, what feat would be optimal for the Life Cleric, and what spells you should try and pick up along the way. Also, we can go over some techniques and the best way to play the Life Cleric. There is no right way to play it, but some ways are more advantageous than others when it comes to keeping your party alive. Oh, and it's worth noting that the Life Domain Cleric synergizes really well with big, bulkier, tankier melee classes like the Barbarian, Fighter, and Paladin. Let's start off by going through the races in the player's handbook and which one would be the best for the Life Domain Cleric. Going through them all, you would notice that no class has a natural boost to their wisdom, which is the main stat the cleric is based around. So the cleric's secondary role is to tank up, take damage, and try to keep the aggression away from the more lightweight classes. So to that extent, I would recommend the Dwarf with a natural boost to Constitution, and has Dwarven Resilience as well, and they naturally get access to certain types of weapons. The Half-Orc is a good choice because of the plus Constitution. Relentless Endurance is always handy. If you're the last person alive, the last thing you want to do is go down to unconscious and start getting death rolls. And Relentless Endurance is a get out of jail free card. The last race I would recommend is the Human. I know it's a bit vanilla to say, but getting a +1 to all ability scores really helps out, especially if you're rolling dice to decide your statistics. It's always helpful when you're faced with a lot of odd numbers. So, outside of the player's handbook, if you go to Volo's Guide to Monsters, you can find the Furbolg. It gets a +2 to Wisdom, a plus Strength, and has Hidden Step, which can help you turn invisible and get you in and out of the fight to heal the frontliners. Turtles are another option. In the Turtle package, they get a natural boost to Wisdom and Strength if you're using strength-based weapons. And they have natural armor and shell defense as well, which, like I said before, is very suitable to tank a lot of damage, and that's the secondary role you'll be having as a cleric. The last honourable mention is the Loxodon from Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. It gets a natural +2 Constitution bonus, an additional 1 Wisdom, and much like the Turtle, has natural armour. Next we'll move on to the feats that work best with the Life Cleric. First off, I'd like to recommend a Heavy Armour Master. A Life Cleric gets access to Heavy Armour at first level, so it's a no-brainer to try and reduce the damage even more. I wouldn't recommend Inspiring Leader, because it's based around Charisma and not Wisdom, so it always depends on what sort of stats your character has. I would actually, instead of Inspiring Leader, recommend the Chef feat found in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, because that's one of the few feats that actually let you naturally boost up your Wisdom. As someone that's played a Cleric in the past, finding feats that boost your Wisdom are few and far between. Another feat which I wouldn't recommend is Healer. At first glance you would think this goes hand in hand with the Life Cleric, but it's pretty much redundant because anything you can do with the Healer feat you can also do with the Cleric's moveset. Yes, you can technically heal people up without using a spell slot, but if you're not managing your spell slots that well, maybe think about something more than just a healing kit. Another option in the player's handbook is the mobile feat. One of the key issues with being a healer is getting in range of frontliners, healing them up, and then trying to get out of combat, so the mobile feat works well with that. Like I mentioned previously, there are few feats that actually help you boost your wisdom, and resilient is one of them. It's not the best feat, but to try and bump up your wisdom to 20 is always going to be a struggle. This may be an option to consider. And lastly, Warcaster. It's a staple of any casting class, especially if you're going to be taking hits. It's a lot more useful. If you're playing a wizard or a sorcerer, you don't want to be in combat, but as a cleric you're more likely to see hand-to-hand melee happening. The Life Domain focuses on the vibrant positive energy, one of the fundamental sources of the universe, that sustains all life. The gods of life promote vitality and health through the healing of the sick and the wounded, caring for those in need, and driving away the forces of death and undeath. Almost any non-evil deity can claim influence over the domain, particularly agricultural deities such as Shanti, Arowai and Demeter, sun gods such as Lathander, Pelor, and Rihorakti, gods of healing or endurance such as Ilmater, Mishakal, Apollo and Diacent, and gods of home and community, such as Hestia, Hathor and Bordray. Now, let's go through the Life Domain Cleric's exclusive spell list. The Life Domain Cleric gets access to these spells regardless of what was prepared in the morning. At first level, you get Bless and Cure Wounds. Bless is a classic spell to use when you're trying to buff up the party, and at low levels it can really make a big impact, especially if you can bless your whole team. Cure Wounds technically heals more damage than Healing Word, but the key issue with Cure Wounds is it takes a full action and you have to be within melee range. It's still a good spell if you're just trying to heal up raw hit points, but I would try and get Healing Word over Cure Wounds because Healing Word is a bonus action and has a casting range of 60 feet. At level 3, you gain access to Lesser Restoration and Spiritual Weapon. Lesser Restoration can help out, and it's one of those great backup spells that you don't know you're going to need it until you really need it. And Spiritual Weapon is going to be a mainstay of the cleric. Using Spiritual Weapon to tie up your bonus action to deal extra damage, it really adds value over time, especially when you're trying to combat a long, grueling fight with creatures with high hit points. At 5th level, you get the iconic spell Revivify and Beacon of Hope. Beacon of Hope is good for long rests and regaining the maximum number of hit points possible, so if you can set one of these up and have other party members be able to heal, then that's a great way to use and utilise your action economy. And Revivify brings people back from the dead. It's one of the most powerful spells. It's akin to the Wizard's classic Fireball, in the sense that it's a character-defining spell. You touch a creature that has died within the last minute, the creature returns to life with 1 hit point. The downside of this is that you do need a lot of expensive components. You need a diamond worth 300 gold, which the spell consumes. So the party should always have a 300 gold worth of diamond on them at any time, because having a party member die is a very traumatic experience and really changes the complexion of the game. And some newer players might feel like they've been cheated out of the game when their character dies, but it's the natural process of playing D&D over a long time. At level 7, you gain access to Guardian of Faith and Death Ward. Death Ward is like a get out of jail free card. It's similar to the Orcish Endurance ability. It lasts for 8 hours, so you can have some shenanigans with elves with not needing to sleep for 8 hours for a long rest. If you have an elf cleric, you can cast Death Ward and then rest for 4 hours, and it should still be up for 4 hours and you'd have all of your spell slots available. With Death Ward, the first time a target would drop to 0 hit points as a result of taking damage, it drops to 1 hit point instead, and this cancels out the spell. You know the old saying, prevention is better than cure? Well, Death Ward doesn't require any monetary items to use, so it's better to cast a Death Ward over a Revivify, which would use up the 300 gold worth of diamond. And Guardian of Faith is useful in map control. The Guardian occupies a space and it looks like a sword and shield with the symbol of your deity printed on it. Any creature that moves within the space must make a dex save or take 20 radiant damage, half on a successful one. The best application is putting this in a narrow corridor and having the enemy try to fight through it and throwing lots of range spells from behind. At 9th level, you gain access to Mass Cure Wounds and Raise Dead. Now, Raise Dead, you shouldn't need to be told how powerful this spell can be. It raises the dead. And the creature can be dead for up to 10 days. So having access to this spell, if one of your party members dies and it's not a TPK, you can take the party back to town and try to cast this spell to get the character back to life. It's worth noting there are penalties when you come back from the dead. You take a +4 penalty to all attack rolls, saving throws and ability checks, until you have a few long rests to try and reduce this. Now, with regards to Mass Cure Wounds, it's one of those things that you think, oh, it's a fantastic spell, you can heal multiple people at the same time. But for a level 5 spell, it only does 3d8 plus your spellcasting ability mod, which I think there are more economical ways of keeping people alive. It's good if you have a spare spell slot and you need to heal up the party before a short rest, but yeah, it's just okay, it's not fantastic. There are better 5th level spells to take. Now, let's move on to the Life Cleric's abilities. At 1st level, you gain proficiency with heavy armor, which would be very helpful when you're trying to get in and out of combat and trying to cast Cure Wounds at close range. Also at 1st level, you get Disciple of Life. When you try to use a spell that heals a creature of 1st level or higher, they heal an additional 2 hit points plus the spell's level. This little top-up is a luxury, and I think that when you become accustomed to it, when you go back to a class that doesn't have this bonus, you kind of feel like you're missing something. It's definitely an overall general buff, but it's not a heavy, instant, impactful thing to do. At level 2 though, when you get your Channel Divinity ability, you can choose Preserve Life. As an action, you present your holy symbol and evoke the healing energy that can restore a number of hit points equal to 5 times your cleric level. Choose any creatures within 30 feet of you and divide those hit points among them. This feature can restore a creature to no more than half of its hit point maximum. You can't use this on an undead or a construct. So for anyone that's played Overwatch in the first year it was released, you'll notice a similarity between Mercy's ultimate and this Preserve Life ability. You can literally raise your whole party back up from a TPK, and it can be a really clutch ability in the right circumstances. It's one of the most powerful healing abilities you can get in the game, and it scales well over time, getting tied to your cleric level, so the higher you go, the more powerful it gets. At level 6, you get access to Blessed Healer. When you cast a healing spell, it also affects you as well as the person you're healing. When you cast a spell of 1st level or higher that restores hit points to a creature other than you, you regain hit points equal to 2 plus the spell's level. Again, just like Disciple of Life, this ability is not a very large impactful thing, but it's great for topping up your health. If you're in the front line with the tanks and you're taking damage, then this can help the survivability of the party overall. A lot of this subclass is not about having big, flashy, impactful spells, with Revivify as a notable exception. It's actually quite helpful if you're a veteran player and you're playing with some new people that are unfamiliar with the game. If you choose Life Cleric, you can look after them and make sure that they stay in the party quite well. At level 8, you get access to Divine Strike. You can infuse your weapon with divine energy. Once a turn, when you hit a creature with a weapon, you can deal an extra 1d8 radiant damage to the target. When you reach level 14, the extra damage increases to 2d8. Now the scaling is nice. 2d8 at level 14 isn't fantastic, but it's always nice to have. It's almost like a version of the Paladin's Smite ability. And note that it says with a weapon attack, not a melee weapon attack. So this can apply to crossbows, bows, or any other ranged weapons you might have available to you. Finally, at level 17, you gain Supreme Healing. When you would normally roll one or more dice to restore hit points with a spell, you instead use the highest number possible for each die. For example, instead of restoring 2d6 hit points to a creature, you restore 12. Now, gaining maximum rolls on your healing is brilliant, and is appropriate for 17th level, I think. When you get that high of a level in D&D, the hit points can usually go up to the hundreds, the triple digits, so restoring as much as possible is essential for keeping your party alive. Now, let's have a look at the overall class and give it a rating. I think that it's a key, essential part of any party to have a healer, and this subclass is the best healer you can get. It does one job and it does it fantastically. It heals as much as possible, and it can tank a good hit or two as well. Having access to heavy armor from first level can really help you out at between level 1 and 5. There's a reason that this is one of the most commonly picked subclasses in the whole of the game, because it's just that essential to the game's mechanics. It's almost like the game has been built around having a Life Domain Cleric to heal people up. And for that reason, it's one of the most iconic subclasses in the whole game, and I have to give it an S rank. If anything, having a game without a healer is really playing on hard mode. You're deliberately handicapping yourself to gain more challenge, possibly? It's worth noting that the Life Domain Cleric has great synergy with the Blood Hunter as well. A lot of the Blood Hunter's abilities revolve around damaging itself, so healing someone else, the Blood Hunter, is a natural combination. If you're interested in continuing the conversation, there's an open Discord for people to join, and if you want to help support the channel, a thumbs up and a comment is always appreciated. And if you want to help out monetarily, we have a Patreon open at the moment. If you'd like to buy me a coffee and throw a couple of bucks my way, it'd be real nice. If you want to donate $2 a month, then it could really help the channel out and help me maintain releasing these videos. Well, thanks for watching the video, and I'll speak to you next time. Goodbye.